we are live, 6:56, 4 minutes to spare. Hope you guys are all doing well. It's hump day. So today we're going to talk about boost, naturally, because it's the thing we always talk about, right? Not just boost, big boost. And I'll have to admit, I like big boost, and I cannot lie. Big boost is awesome, and today we're going to talk about positive displacement blowers, more specifically because of the video that I posted today, the Kenny Bell twin screw, although it still applies to Whipple and any positive displacement blower, the Magnuson 671s, 871s, 471s, anybody in the 71 family, basically, all of those are fine. And what we're going to talk about basically lends itself to all of these kinds of superchargers, because and to some extent to the centrifugals and the turbos also, because as we go bigger, basically it's able to feed more power. That's what we're going to talk about on the positive displacement stuff. So for the Kenny Bell, the reason, if you take a look at the video, if you have not taken a look at it, it's a 462 valve that we ran a 2.6 liter Kenny Bell on, and with the big mammoth intake and the big oval throttle body. And so we've got a big blower, we've got a big inlet system, a big throttle body. I didn't show this in the photos in the video, but Kenny Bell also offered a giant size 4.5 inch inlet tube and mass air assembly and all that, and giant size, an air cleaner that was this big. Because the problem is that anything that you put in front of that blower that's going to be a restriction is going to hurt power potential. So that's what we're going to get into. So on the Kenny Bell, we ran it on a 462 valve. Could be run on anything. They make blower kits for the 4 valve, the 3 valve, the Coyote, you name it, all kinds of stuff, Hemis, whatever. It's a twin screw supercharger, and it's a positive displacement supercharger. So first of all, the first part of it being a twin screw, it's different than a roots blower. A roots blower has a different design, doesn't provide internal compression. The big difference is that a roots blower basically is an air mover. The rotors spin around, they grab air from the top or the end, and then move the air from that side over to the underside of the blower. Twin screws actually have internal compression. That's why twin screw supercharger, if you believe any of the thousands of SAE papers ever written on the subject, the twin screw design is more efficient than a roots blower is, even the new hybrid stuff. So twin screw is the most efficient positive displacement form of supercharging, if you believe the things that you read and things like science. But the thing with positive displacement blowers is because whether it's a roots blower or a twin screw blower, the reason that we call them positive displacement blowers is because of every revolution of the impellers or rotors, they move a fixed amount of air, and the amount of air that they moved is determined by the size of the blower, the size of the case and the size of the rotor. And so for every revolution, they move a fixed amount of air. They're measured in, you can measure them in liters or however you want to, but as you go up, the thing is, like, as we would expect, since every revolution adds a certain amount of airflow, as you go up in displacement, you make the rotors bigger, you make the case bigger, each revolution now is going to add more airflow. So what happens is, and the other thing we need to talk a little bit about on the positive displacement blowers, more so on the roots blower than on the twin screw, there's a limit to how fast you can spin them. There's a limit in the bearing capability. There's a limit in the rotor speed, and also the bigger that you get them, it actually lowers the eventual speed. So you grow in airflow displacement based on the displacement, but you also come down in potential rotor speed. So since there's a limit in speed, you have a limit to how much airflow any given size can actually supply. So that's why, when guys on any sort of factory application, if you take a Shelby GT500, the 5.4 or the 5.8, anything, any factory supercharged application, will stay with that. The first thing that people do, like with anything, is if you have a supercharger on there, the first thing you do, obviously, is you turn the boost up, because from the factory, it's not running the maximum amount of boost that whatever that blower will support. So you turn the boost up, you do a good tune, and you can make a lot of power. Eventually, you run into some sort of limitation. If the blower sizing in the factory application was not sized to make 1,000 horsepower, it was sized to make whatever kind of power level that they wanted it to make. And since they're not up at the 1,000 horsepower level stuff, they design them, they size the blower to have a little bit of excess capacity so that it could be kind of in the sweet spot of what the blower can do. They sized the blower to run at a certain speed and a certain pressure and supply a certain amount of airflow for the power output that they determined that they needed for their application. We can always spin them up a little bit faster. There's more there. We can improve the inlet system, and that's the next thing that we'll talk about. Is in addition to the displacement and the speed of the blower relative to the engine, which determines how much airflow the blower will support or process through the blower, we're also limited by the inlet side of the blower. On a positive displacement blower, everything that's in front of the blower can potentially become a restriction. You want to try to maximize the airflow into the blower. That way we maximize the airflow and the boost out of the blower. So like in the case of this Kenny Bell twin screw and most of them, there's going to be some sort of intake manifold, if you will. There's an intake manifold under the blower. Like in the Kenny Bell, we have a lower intake manifold. It's more of kind of a common plenum, very short runners. It packages the intercooler. So it's a big open plenum basically with short runners on it. And that's kind of typical for these kinds of blowers because you have to package. If you're trying to package something that fits under the hood, you have a limited amount of space. On the modular stuff, it's nice because they got a big valley down, between the cylinder heads. You got a lot of packaging room there, but you have that lower manifold. But feeding the blower, you also have some, you can call it a manifold, attached to the back of the blower normally, and then you have that fed by the throttle body. So in the case of the Kenny Bell, we had a mammoth intake manifold or air intake entry, and then a big oval throttle body. A lot of times the Kenny Bell does this, and other manufacturers, Magnus and Whipple, these guys, they also do this where they'll make that intake going into the blower a lot of times so that it will accept the factory throttle body. So, and especially in the case of drive-by-wire stuff, that just makes life easier to program it. So you put the factory drive-by-wire throttle body on there, and then some sort of air intake. Maybe it'll go, if they're trying to do emissions legal stuff, it'll go over to the factory air box and all that stuff. A lot of guys like Kenny Bell and others make that inlet that they make adaptable. So they make it so that you have an adapter plate to mount a stock throttle body, or you could also mount another kind of throttle body to do an upgrade. Because more than likely the factory throttle body, in the case of the modular stuff or LS stuff or Coyote stuff, the factory throttle body was sized to feed a certain amount of airflow that the factory motor was making. It wasn't sized to feed an extra 100 or 200 or 500 horsepower that the blower could possibly supply. But so what will happen is the throttle body size will become a restriction for airflow going into the supercharger. So you want a bigger one. So they make these inlet systems so that you can run the stock one if that's what you want, or run a bigger one, which we did on the 462 valve on the engine dyno. So we ran a big oval throttle body and the big mammoth intake to maximize the airflow into the blower so that we weren't restricting it. What happens when you restrict that, whether it's the throttle body or the air intake or anything in front of that, the mass air meter, the air inlet tube, the filter, any of that stuff, if you restrict it, what you see at any given blower size and speed is that you'll see a drop in boost. So it will make less boost. And conversely, and this is what we normally see when we test, is if we're running it with the stock throttle body or a stock air box or intake, and we replace that with stuff that flows a lot more air, we see a big jump in boost. We see more air going into the motor, and that translates into more boost provided by the blower to the motor, and then more power obviously out of the blower. So that's why in the case, and you saw the thumbnail and description that I was talking about, that bigger is better. So if we make the blower bigger for every rotation that it makes, it can supply more air. If you open up and make bigger the inlet manifold and throttle body and air intake and filter in front of the blower, also same thing. If you make that bigger, you'll be able to supply more air to the blower, then it will be able to supply more boost out and more power and airflow to the motor, and then make more power. There is an argument to be made, as always, that putting a smaller blower on that's going to be more responsive and maybe spinning it a little faster in some applications can work better. And it can, especially if you're not trying to max out the blower. So let's say you want 600 horsepower. So you don't need to put a blower that's capable of 1500 horsepower, just like with the turbo stuff. You don't need to put a blower on there that's capable of 1500 horsepower because you're never going to utilize that. And the problem is, as we've seen with in some of our other discussions, that you have to run the big blower so slow that it's not going to be as responsive. So speeding up the little blower at a lower boost level can oftentimes make the thing more responsive down low, and you can have a better average like boost curve and average power production. So there is some room to talk there. But when we're talking about like maximum flow things, obviously make the blower bigger, and then and that always seems to be the thing for guys, because especially now that we have factory force induction things like from GM, we have the ZR1 stuff, and then we have on the Hemi side, we've got the Demon stuff, the Red Eye stuff. You know, it's just Hellcat stuff, and then the Shelby stuff over on the Ford side. They have some fairly serious players right from the factory. So a lot of those blower applications, especially the 2650 stuff, will make a lot of power. It will go into the 4-digit levels. So to get beyond that, you have to have some fairly good size, which like on the 2.6 would certainly go beyond that. And they've got a 2.8, a 3.2, and a 3.6, and a 4.2, and a 4.7, and a 4.9. So you can make, I mean, you know, we've seen 1600 from the 3.6 and the 4.2, I think, on the Kenny Bell. And I don't know that anyone's ever tried to max out any of the near 5-liter blowers, but it's just, you know, it's a tremendous amount of power if you have the right combination. That's not to say that if you put a big blower on your otherwise stock 4.62 valve, that it's going to make 1500 horsepower, because it's not going to. And actually, if you look at the video that I posted today on the 4.62 valve, that 2.6 liter blower, we weren't using anywhere near as much as that blower had to offer. In fact, I talked about the fact that, and this is something that's important when you're looking at these kinds of superchargers, and to the same extent, on the centrifugal stuff too, is that I usually go out of my way, if I'm putting together a combination like this, to make the motor as effective and powerful in naturally aspirated form, so that when we do add the blower, that we are running as little boost as possible and making as much power as possible. Because that's the thing, the blower will flow more air at a lower boost level at the same blower speed. So it makes more power that way. So I know that's seems odd that it makes more power at less boost, but if you make the naturally aspirated combination, like adding camshafts to it, adding ported heads, making it bigger, doing all those things, and you're still spinning the blower at the same speed, what will happen is the boost will go down and the power will go up. All of that's just good stuff. So that's how positive displacement blowers work. And so hopefully you guys have a better understanding of that. We've run Kenny Bells on a lot of different things way back doing as a matter of fact, the Kenny Bell blower stuff, the twin screw goes all the way back to the 5-liter days when they were running non-intercooled stuff, and they started out with a 1.5 liter blower. Now they're 3 times that. So they have a lot more potential now. I remember we were running like these tiny little blower pulleys on the little 1.5 to get them sped up, especially if you had a modified 5-liter motor, which, you know, there were lots of cylinder heads and camshafts and all kinds of things, especially if you had a 347 stroke or something and you were trying to feed it, you needed a much bigger blower. And since they didn't have an intercooler, it was a little bit limiting. They made it a lot better when they eventually put a bypass valve on it so that it would recirculate some of that stuff. Because when you're cruising down the road and the air is not recirculating, the charge temperature gets pretty hot. And then when you nail the throttle, you get this big rush of really hot air if you don't have a bypass valve on it. So that was one of the good things that they did to it. And then on a lot of the modular stuff, they incorporate, because there was more room, like I said, in the valley, they incorporate intercoolers, which was a really big gain for them, especially when you're running, guys, it's not uncommon for guys to be running 20 pounds of boost or so on these things, which we did on the 2-valve. We ran it as high as 22 pounds. And again, at 22 pounds, I would like to see some really big power numbers, much bigger than we saw on the 4.62 valve. I don't think it was the best example of what could have been done. I wish I would have run that same combination on the 4.62 valve, the first one that I put together, that had the ported PI heads and had the 274 cam and had the non-PI short block, although the compression would have been fairly high. but we did have an intercooler, and we didn't run that on E85 either, which would have definitely been beneficial. We only ran it on a mixture of race gas and pump gas, but it still worked fairly well, and we were up near 750 horsepower or something. Yeah, 749 at 22.5 pounds. So it was, it was up there in boost and up there pretty good in power. And it shows that, and we showed that with some of the other turbo things and nitrous things and stuff, you can make any of these motors, make lots of power with the right application of boost. And especially if you go to the trouble of making it more powerful, naturally aspirated before you add the boost, because that's always good. Okay, let's see what you guys got going on. Tim Anderson, I keep advocating for the 2.5 liter dual plug. 9902 Rangers. Oh, is that the Duratec motor? Team Boosted built a Turbo 2.3 Lima and put it in a 240Z. I'd much rather have a 4-valve version of that. Turning right, what is the best aftermarket heads for an LQ4? Luckily for you, I have a video up that has, like, I don't know, a dozen or more, excuse me, cathedral port heads for the 6-liter. And I also have another video of rec port heads tested on a 6.2, but they'll be the same on an LQ4. So you can take a look at that and see which ones you like the best. I'm looking at a twin turbo kit, 0.57 compressors. I'm thinking that that's for your 6-liter LS2 based motor. Trick flow heads or modded stock heads. Are you talking about a 2-valve? Why did I look at the thumbnail of the Supercharger and thought they were guns? No, just boost. How much boost can a stock Coyote engine take? I don't know. I've never done a big bang one of those, but you'll definitely want to put ring gap in it. Jeremy, we did a Kenny Bell on an 03 Terminator, made 666. That thing was a beast. We've done, I think, 850 or 900 on a cammed Terminator motor back when I was doing the boost comparison of the turbos and the Kenny Bell and the Eaton and a Vortec or a Paxton centrifugal. They can certainly make a lot of power. Shadow, would increasing valve size on the 862 heads increase the chamber size from 61 cc's? No, it actually might decrease the chamber size if the valve takes up more of the area of the chamber. I don't know that it's going to change it very much. Does anyone run nitro RC car fuel like methanol injection setup? Guys made comments about that when I did the video on the water meth injection test on the 3800. I've never tried it though. Will a GT35 be laggy on the BMW 3-liter 6-cylinder? I hate turbo lag. Well, it's going to be naturally aspirated at some point in the RPM range. It has to be. And it depends on what hot side GT35 you're doing and how much power you want. And what BMW 3-liter 6-cylinder is it? Is it a 240 horsepower one? Which one is it? Richard, I'm looking into a twin kit on eBay. Okay, I haven't done specific kits, but Volvo head swap, that would be a good idea. Rotrex or Craftworks SC for 1.8. C5. I don't like rating horsepower per cubic inch. It's like having a foot race across charcoal. Who cares if a Coyote makes tons of power if the engine is dimensionally huge and highly complex? Shadow Ops, the trick flow heads will definitely make more power than even ported stock 2-valves. But the thing is, how much power do you want to make? Are you taking the 2-valve to where you are going to max out the flow potential of ported stock 2-valve heads, where you need the extra flow of the trick flow heads? The other thing I don't know, and somebody might know out there, I don't know what the deck thickness difference is between a stock 2-valve head and a trick flow 2-valve head. I'm hoping that I should have asked that of Brian if they made the deck thickness thicker on the 2-valve head like they have on all the other aftermarket heads. How badly will going from 5-inch to 3.5-inch downpipe be for the engine? Is it just a single turbo? I know I'll lose power, but I'm concerned about the health of the engine. You're going to lose power and response rate and stuff likely, but at lower power levels, it's not going to change that much. Nathaniel, would you run GT40 aluminum heads or a set of Windsor Senior iron heads on a Lightning 351 for a street car with a supercharger? Are those the only two choices? I would rather run aluminum heads because I think you'd be happier with that and a supercharger and the change in weight and the detonation resistance. I think that would be better. If I was going to pick iron heads, I wouldn't pick a Windsor Senior head. Not that they're not good, but I wouldn't buy a set of iron heads. I would just go get a set of GT40 heads from the wrecking yard and maybe do a little porting and a bigger valve because it'd be a lot cheaper that way. Or if you're going to buy aluminum heads, you should get good ones. For the price of GT40 aluminum heads, you could get probably Skip Whites or something like that, or maybe even the Airflow Enforcer heads. Puppet Master, thank you, is in the house. Tim, you think a GT3582 is going to make 15 pounds at 2,500 on a 3-liter? Daniel on 14.5 pounds of boost, twin 56.5 T3 China turbos. We made 760 to the tire, 8.3 to 1 compression, imported 317 heads. Is that on a 6-liter, I'm assuming, with a cam? Richard, I know you said you don't need a cylinder head upgrade if you're only going for 1,000 horsepower. No, you don't really. Just valve springs. Wrecking KD, anyone else been seeing the 329? Let's see. There we go. It always moves on me. The 329 small block Chevy build CE Performance has been doing. I have not seen that. Patrick, what are the limits for an LS1, boosted gap rings and head studs, etc.? We don't take those motors over 1,000 horsepower, and I think that the LS1 would be the one that I would take the lowest between an LS1 and an LS2 and an LS3. Bring back the dislike button. I agree. Harry, what causes aftermarket cams on an LS to decrease fuel economy during highway cruise, increase overlap and duration? Trying to select a cam for a long distance tow vehicle, you should just keep a stock cam in there if you want. If what you're trying to get is fuel mileage, it'll be hard for you to find a camshaft that will get better fuel mileage than the factory cam. Raymond, MBE 13-degree heads. What's your opinion? Small block Chevy. I don't know. I haven't seen that video, so I don't know. You can get some fairly inexpensive porting done from the guys at K-Tech, and I know that they'll do 706 and 862 heads, and I think that they have a program for 243 heads too. You won't get all the way to what a TrickFlow 225 or 235 head does, but you don't really need to do that anyway if you're running boost on it. Single S480, looking at 750 crank. That's easy on a 6-liter. Mr. B, do you have any good links for an LS to swap at a 95 hybrid? I don't have any. I don't do swap videos. GBS Garage, Richard, will an aluminum block 5.3 turbo hold up okay at 800 horsepower? Yeah, guys are running twice that, so that's not going to be a problem. The aluminum L33 and LC9, and I think there's an LH one too. All of those are more than strong enough. The Car Show King, yes, I do have a video up on checking pushrod length. Admiral, what should I expect from mildly porting my 2V heads or 04 Vic heads, and should I bother softening the chamber? I'm not sure how to do that on that head. You might talk to Brian Tooley. Since he designed the TrickFlow heads, he's probably pretty up on that. And I don't know what you mean by mildly porting. If you look in, there might be some porting things in Sean Hyland's book. I haven't really looked for that to see. I remember 245 or something as a fully ported set. Jonathan, I have a built L83 turbo motor with log manifold. I don't know exactly what that means. Back pressure is high on high boost. Considering FF tube manifolds, whatever that is. Tuner says it may help response with extra power and flow. What do you say? I'd have to look exactly at which ones you're talking about. But the first thing I would look at is the turbo that you're using and find out if the turbo is responsible for the back pressure, and then go look at the stuff that's before the turbo. It's not unlikely for a log manifold to do that. I don't know. Is this a single turbo? Is it a Y pipe? How are they merged together? There's a lot of questions I have there. Dom in today's video notes the pictures show the engine had TrickFlow heads. Was that just an engine? It's just a different photo. The only channel 01, have you ever messed around with Cummins? I did. I had a Dodge 3500 dually that had a Cummins in it, and we did some stuff on the chassis dyno, but I've never done anything on the engine dyno with diesels, and I won't either. A 400 block with a 283. A 283 crank is just a 3-inch stroke crank, right? because that's what the DZ302 was. Daniel, the Holly Sniper short runner works really well with turbos, and it fits right in the place of an LS6. It doesn't. It works terrible with turbos. An LS6 will make a lot more power through everywhere in the curve except at the very, very top. But it does package nice, and it looks a lot better than the factory manifolds. It just loses a lot of low-speed power because it has short runners. Harry, on cam mile per gallon, trying to find a happy balance between chop, power, and MPG. Okay. So you want it to sound like a cam, but I don't want to give away the mileage of the cam, of a stock cam. You want it to sound like a cool cam, and I still want to get the mileage of a stock cam, but have all the power of the aftermarket cam. You might be able to do that with VVT. But your question about you're debating between a BTR stage 2 truck cam and the truck Norris cam, I would pick a truck Norris cam. Harry, I wasn't able to find any information online why aftermarket cams decrease fuel economy. First of all, it's not aftermarket cams. You can buy an aftermarket cam that has the same specs as the factory cam, and it will do exactly the same thing as the factory cam does. It's the cam specs that you need to look at. And because you're looking now with an aftermarket cam for more power, when you get more power, you trade off low speed power. And when you trade off low speed power, you also trade off fuel economy because the thing's not nearly as efficient down there, especially at part throttle, as it was with the stock cam, because that's one of the things that they designed into the stock cam. And the reason why there's a whole bunch of power left out here at the top and kind of in the middle too, but certainly out at the top on a stock cam, because they're looking at this fuel economy and emissions part of the camshaft that's way more important to them. They were able to make their power goal, and then they had to get these other goals too, which are very important. And that's why when you change to an aftermarket cam where you get more power, you have to sacrifice one of those things. David Wild, 464 valve engine from a Lincoln Mark 8. Do you think stock Cobra cams would be an upgrade? I don't know. That would be a question I'd have to ask Sanchez or Mahovitz to know if the Lincoln cams are different, and if they are, how much different they are. Go for broke. 500 horsepower de-stroked 400s have been around for years. Yeah, they've been doing them a lot. Nothing special about that. Roundy round guys have been making them scream like that forever. And they've also done not the 3-inch stroke, but the 327, the 3250 stroke in those as well, and the 350 stroke. So you can put any of those cranks in that you want and get a variety of different displacements with that 4125 bore. Roy, what is your opinion on the Cadillac Supercharger mounted on a 6-liter? Will it reliably make? I think it would certainly make 600. So Tim, I don't think 15 pounds at 2,500 on a 3-liter with a GT35 is unreasonable. 4G63 2-liter guys are hitting 25 pounds at 4,000. If you do the math on that, I'm really close. So you're basing that on the math of the displacement of the motor, not on the power output or what the torque curve looks like or anything? And not on an actual test where you've seen a 3-liter motor on the dyno like preferably in this case on the chassis dyno or out on the street, making that boost at that power, at that RPM level. And the other thing is we don't know what 3 liter that is. Is it a 300 horsepower one, like a 330 horsepower, 360 horsepower? Is it a 230 horsepower one? Those are going to affect the boosters a lot. That's all I'm saying. Can you do a big bang on a Lima 2300 single cam? I see Rangers. Overbuilt. Hey, Richard and a fellow hot rodders. A pen storage your next fuzzy navel. Mixed drink of your preference. I told you it's raspberry lemon drop, the manliest of all the lemon drop family. Although we just found some new Cosmopolitans, I think, at the store, which were really good. Patrick, another thing I tossed around was putting a 5.3, throwing 317 heads on to drop the compression for more boost. There's no limited amount of boost that you can run with a 243 head, unless you're trying to do it on 91 octane. That would be the only reason you might think about 317 heads. Otherwise, go with your 243 heads. Thoughts on a turbo or ProCharger if low-end torque is a concern? Neither one of those are ideal for real low end. The ProCharger, any centrifugal supercharger, is not going to be really very responsive down low because they make very, very little boost down at 2,000 and 2,500 RPM. The turbo, if you put a really, really small one on there, you could get it to come up, depending on what motor you're putting this on. You could get that to come up, but then you're going to limit the top end. A positive displacement supercharger would work really good if that's what your concern is, if that's your only concern. So that's the thing. When people want to pick the best kind of forced induction, you have to determine how you weigh each of those things. When I nail the throttle, I want it to have all the boost. Okay, then maybe you want a positive displacement blower. I just want it to storm on the big end. You want a centrifugal or you want a turbo. All of those things that people choose are different than what somebody else is going to tell you is the best thing. Ring gaps and boost correlations, that's where I'm leading. The ring gap on a diesel, I think, is going to be the same as it is on the gas engine. Although I might go a little bit more on the heavy side, on the big side, because the thing about diesel engines is a lot of times they're run under load and boost for longer periods of time, typically, than gas engines are. So I think that they might have more gap in them, if anything. Admiral, what was your question? The maximum nitrous a stock Coyote engine could take. I don't know what you mean by stock. I wouldn't ever try to put the maximum amount of nitrous on anything that didn't have ring gap on it. How far have you taken a 3800 Ecotech and turbo on a stock bottom end? I'm assuming it will benefit from more ring gap. Yeah, is the 3800 the V6 an Ecotech engine family? I didn't know if it was or not. And the most I've run so far is about 15. No, I take that back. We ran 15 pounds with the blower. It's over 400 horsepower now. And with the compound blower and turbo, we ran 21 or 22 pounds. And I haven't taken it apart to change the ring gap. I need to, though. And this is the 85, and on the compound deal, we had an air to water intercooler. We have cold air and all that. So we have a lot of things, cold water. We have a lot of things going for us. But before we do the big bang on them, I'm definitely going to take it apart and put ring gap in it. Piston to wall clearance versus alloy or aluminum. You actually should be less concerned about the block than you should about the metallurgy of the piston itself. That's going to determine the growth. James, I'm the wrong guy to ask about that, but his question was, my 823 hits came back from CNC porting with a big ugly lump in the combustion chamber at the spark plug boss. That lump is beneficial. Shouldn't that have been contoured smaller? I don't know how exactly they reshape it. I don't ever remember looking at CNC versions of that head. I don't think you want to, I know that you don't want to get rid of it. Relative unknown. What horsepower level is the stock fastener on the LS23 good for before you need to upgrade to ARP studs and bolts? If I'm running boost on it, I always put ARP studs in it. I have run boost with stock stuff and it works. And I know Matt over at Sloppy has done that a lot. I don't know what that level is. Just like I don't know what level boost you can run with the stock rain gap because we don't know what the rain gap is. And with the head bolt thing, you don't know that that's the thing that's gonna go first. Is it going to stretch enough and then you're going to blow a head gasket? You know, I just don't know. You're not going to break a head bolt, I don't think. So I don't know what that level is. We've run a lot of power with them, but I don't know for how long. And I like putting head studs in it. Yeah, Admiral, I didn't know what your question was. Jonathan, Precision 76 billet turbo, stock manifold on the driver's side, crossover pipe through a log manifold into the turbo. So some of your videos on forward-facing tubular manifolds. Will it hurt response? No, I don't. Not compared to what you have. The way that we have our setup are two factory truck manifolds facing forward with a Y pipe, and the turbo's mounted usually to the side, kind of the way that the one of the Y pipe lengths is longer than the other. They're not exactly the same. And the way the turbo usually mounted off to one side, it favors one side. But I don't think that that's going to affect response. I think the response rate of the turbo is going to be the hot side of the turbo more than that stuff. The thing that I don't know about is I don't know how much is your log manifold side bigger than the manifold is on the other side, because it has to flow more air, and I don't know what the outlet of that is. Is it a 3-inch outlet? How big is the outlet on that? Mark, have you ever experimented with heads that have chamber softening done? No, it's a test Brian Tooley and I have been talking about for a long time. We want to actually do that test in a vehicle so that we can monitor knock counts and see what it's like in the real world with real temperature and all that. But I haven't done it yet, though. Brian's done it on their drag race cars a lot. Will I pick up power from the reduced back pressure from the headers feeding the turbo? Yes. If you have back pressure and you get rid of it and it's from that, you will change power. I did that on the Holly setup or hooker setup, where they have the merge going into that one side of the turbo manifold, and it's all packaged nice, so it fits very well. It's just not designed to make like 1,000 horsepower, 1,000 plus horsepower stuff. So we started seeing fairly high back pressure. It has a 3-inch V band on it, and then a single wastegate, and then we mount the turbo on that, as opposed to the way that we ran our setup. There was a definite change in power and a definite change in back pressure. Michael, you should try the 3076s, and then if you get to a point where you're wanting more power and could think about trading off the response, and try the 35s. What do you think a Z304 head Explorer 5-liter? I don't know what that question is. I've run the Z304 head, if that's your, and I think I know I have test data on it, and I think it worked okay. I thought that's the one that we had problems with, maybe, but I wouldn't pick that head over an airflow research head or a trick flow head for a 5-liter. Daniel, you picked up 500 horsepower with a sniper over a stock manifold. That would be a neat trick. Channel 01, would increasing the lift on a stock cam, but nothing else help increase power and efficiency? I don't know what you mean by efficiency. If you're talking about fuel mileage or torque, or I don't know what you mean by that. Based on driving style, the single biggest thing you can do to change your fuel economy is change your driving style. When somebody talks to me about fuel mileage, when they're saying it improves fuel mileage, it has nothing to do with driving style. For me, if you do a change in fuel mileage, that means that you went out and ran on a flat level road for 200 miles and never changed the throttle angle and ran at a consistent RPM and monitored the air fuel and monitored the fuel mileage, and then did the same thing after whatever change you made so that there's no human error there. To get to your point about increasing the lift on a stock cam, yeah, it will help power. It definitely will help power. I don't have a feel for what that will do to fuel economy because it's going to change the lift and it is going to change the duration a little bit. I don't think it's going to change, doesn't really change the duration enough, like 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees or something, to where I think it would hurt fuel mileage. But, you know, doing a test like that is a lot of work to find out actually what the, and you have to do it multiple times too. You can't just go out and go, yeah, I went out and I got, 18 miles per gallon. Then I went back out and I got 19. yeah, but look at your throttle angle data log during the test. You were in the throttle a lot more on the one that you got worse fuel mileage. That's to be expected. And that's part of the problem with those kinds of things. But yes, on more power, because a stock cam, the LS wants more cam timing and it wants to make more power. And so even when we put like rockers on stock cams, they make more power, assuming you have enough spring rate to go along with the rockers. Up North Motorsports, 2012 Silverado, looking for a cam replacement. DOD AFM delete, turbo in the future. Truck doors cam will work good. David Wild, Delta, or someone to grind the cams is the ticket. I'm sure he's talking about the 4V cams. JB, is adding a few gallons of race fuel on a track day good deterrent for knock? Yes, it is. We did that every time we went to the Silver State. Anytime I ever went to the drag strip or anywhere where we were testing, we always put good gas in it just because you don't want it to break while you're there because of that. The LS6 doesn't quit making power at 6,300. I've run that exact comparison. As a matter of fact, there's a video up of that exact comparison. If you want to make power at 8,000 RPM, then yeah, short runner manifold is the way to go. And what I was saying is below 6,300 RPM, the long runner manifold makes more power. But you would pick the manifold that's going to be running in the RPM range that you want to run. That's how runner length works. We should see a 5.4 2-valve or 3-valve hopefully soon. I don't have one of those. I've never had one of those. Any other guys testing coming up? V10, 6.2 liter, 3.5 EcoBoost. None of those. The only one of those that I would like to run is the V10. Juice 414. I'm building the back of a track car. What's bad about putting twin turbo setup in the trunk of the car? Nothing, if that's where it packages. And on a drag car, you can do things to get the thing spooled up on the line that you can't do out on the street. So that actually works. Shadow Ops wants to know, I'm the wrong guy to ask about this since I don't know anything about the factory codes. 04 Trailblazer, Alice 4200, the code PO420. Check the exhaust side idle flow and full throttle flow by hand. Seems no obstruction. Could the O2s be failing? So if somebody knows the answer to that, please help him out. Go for broke. You have to tell me what the NA motor makes. and then that would give me an idea what the combination will make at any given boost level. 17 pounds, I don't know if this is on pump gas, if it's on race gas. If you have full timing, you have an intercooler, maybe you have E85. The head with a stock cam is not a great idea because you're not going to be able to take advantage of what that head has to offer, but it will be better than the stock head. I just don't know by how much. I don't know that I've ever done a cylinder head upgrade on a 5-liter with a stock 5-liter cam. It's so mild. Just putting a cam even in a stock head is worth 30 horsepower or more. I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to say that thing at the flywheel makes 270. And so at 17 pounds, I'm going to say that it makes, I don't know, 550 or something, 560. One bad AMX. Hey, Richard, any advantage horsepower-wise between a single and a twin turbo? No, not if you size them to both do the same thing. How streetable was your FMU Mustang? It was the only car I have, and I drove it every day. So it worked perfect. Peter, what makes more sense for a daily driver, 2.4-liter 240 SX, an M90 Supercharger, or a GT 2874 eBay kit? I've got both. Well, then you should run both, right? Just step up in turbo size and run the blower. I think the turbo is going to be easy for you to install. Do you have some sort of manifold or something that you can put on that will accept the supercharger already, or are you going to have to build that? If I was going to have to fabricate a manifold, then I would just go with the turbo. Do you have much experience with, Dan, do you have much experience with the Mega Squirt? I've run the MS3 Pro now once or twice. How much more difficult than tuning with the Holly? It's just like anything. It's just like when I learned the Holly and first learned the Fast. You just have to learn what buttons to push. For me, I just have to learn what buttons to push to add or subtract fuel and to add or subtract timing. And in the case of the 4200, we have to add or subtract cam timing as well. Once I know what those are, then I just do that. I just said, okay, let's try to run the cam timing at 0 degrees and 10 degrees and 20 degrees, 25, 30, whatever, how much ever we can adjust it. Let's try to run that now let's add a degree of timing. Let's add 2 degrees. Let's add 3 degrees, how much ever we add. Let's make sure our air fuel is right. Okay, I got to take away fuel here. I got to add fuel here. That's all that it is. The other parts of it to get it to drive around and do boost in gear and all kinds of weird stuff that tuners want to do, I don't have to do any of that for what I do at Wide Open Throttle. So it's very simple for me to learn the basic things. The other thing that's great is at West Tech, I have Eric and Ish that are usually there that I can just go ask questions about, and they'll come over and say, as long as they get it running and I know what things to do, especially with a new system like that, like the Mega Squirt, as long as I they leave me there unsupervised. Can you do a video with different motors using the ASA cam? What if we just did an ASA cam test and showed you how it worked? That would be enough. Rob, building a 1970 351 Cleveland 4V. Nice. For a friend, just a stockish rebuild. What are your thoughts on a better than stock cam? Comp has a few cams available for that. Take a look at the videos that I have up. I think we used a fairly good size cam on the 351 that we did, but you can use something smaller. Like if you put think of it as a 350-inch small block that has really good heads on it. And if you put like a 264 or a 274 camshaft, that kind of thing for if it's a daily driver, then that's going to work pretty well. Be easy. If I put springs with the beehive retainers on Vortec heads, how much lift can I run without milling the bosses, and should I port match it? You should be more worried about doing the guides than you should be worrying about port matching it. But it's fairly easy for you to measure to see if you have the springs off. Just put the retainers and keepers on, and then measure to the top of the retainer from the base where the spring is, and then push the valve down, and then measure it again, and go until the retainer, the bottom of the retainer, hits the seal. What is it that's going to be on top of the guide, and then measure the difference. You can also just turn a dial caliper around, and when you have the valve pulled all the way up with the retainer, you can just mic the difference in there, the length of valve that's sticking out in between the seal and the bottom of the retainer, and then you know how much lift you can get away with before you run into retainer to seal clearance problems. How do you make boost fuel efficient? You don't run in boost is the way that you do that for if you're talking about fuel mileage. Jim, a cam 318, perform RPM. What's a 302 head? Looking for 450 horsepower. Are you looking for 450 horsepower with the turbo? Because that doesn't seem like very much. You should put a GT45 turbo on that, and that will work fine. Casey, try Purple Passion Welch's grape juice with Everclear. I've run lots, I've tried lots of Everclear based punch things way back in the day, including Slurpees, which was really good. Kunal, are trick flow heads worth it on a 462 valve? They are if you're doing with the rest of the motor what needs to be done to take advantage of what those heads have to offer, which is quite a bit. Brian, have you seen Rob Dom's channel? Yes, many times. I'm a subscriber. He's building a 3 and 4 rotor engines. I've seen those with CNC intake and exhaust. Your vast knowledge of dyno runs and engine combustion flow could change the rotary world. I think the rotary world probably knows more about rotaries than I do already. You're trying to fix Christmas lights. Any advice? Yeah, you should add boost. Here's my complaint about Christmas lights, whether they're out on your tree or they're out hanging from your house or whatever, which we obviously have ours up, because we're all about that Christmas. Christmas lights should come so that if one bulb goes out, that the whole strand shouldn't go out. There should be voltage to every light. And if one goes out, the only one that goes out should be the one that you should be able to see that's out, and then you should be able to change that. And I've yet to see any strands of light, and we've gone through a lot of them, that actually has that sort of wiring. And I would spend more to have that kind of wiring so that when the light goes out, because when you're done with them at the end of, after New Year's or whatever, whenever you take them down, or February or March or April, I'm not judging. When you take them down and you roll them all up and throw them in the box that you're going to forget where you put until you have to go get them the next time when it's cold and rainy outside. And then you break a bulb. They're mostly LED stuff now, at least that's what we use. But I really wish that they were wired so that only one bulb would go out, because then that way you'd know which one was bad. $317,799 under the Caddy Supercharger mounted on the 6 liters. You can run either one of those. Dan, you got to build a custom intake for the V10. I definitely would. That would be fun just because it would be cool. Williams Racecraft, the people want to see a Big Bang 302, like a 5-liter, a late model 5-liter block, not a early block or a Mexican block or any of that stuff. They like a 5-liter late model hydraulic roller block to see how high we can go without splitting one. I've gone to I want to say 760 or 770 or something, but with a centrifugal supercharger, which I think helps the situation because we would not make nearly as much torque. But it's a pretty big number, and it would be interesting to see how far we could go without splitting the block. Chat room question: install LS2 in my 76 Chevy 4x4. I'll have to add a fuel pump to my system in the tank. Or what's the pressure required for an LS2? You need a high pressure fuel pump that's going to be able to supply 58 PSI, which is what that motor originally came with. Now you can run less, but you usually have to go up an injector if you're going to come down in pressure, depending on what your power output is. The injector needs to be sized. The injector and flow rate of the pump and the pressure need to be adjusted so that they can supply the amount of fuel required for whatever power you're making. And then an in the tank pump works very well. Return to the Super Richie URAM. Yeah, a V10 would be cool because it would definitely have to be a cross ram, although that might be harder to do depending on how the port spacing is and stuff. It might have to go like this or something. Have you decapped injectors for any of your turbo tests? I have, not for these turbo tests, but we've run decapped injectors. And if you do that, you have to make sure that you want to grab like 2 or 3 sets of them, and then you want to flow test them all after you do that, because they're not going to be the same after you decap them. And you need to do a bunch of them so that you can bundle them together as groups of ones that flow the same. Man, I'm slow on my uptake here. James, thank you very much. Appreciate all the testing and valuable information. Oh, Boomer enjoys the technology. Every engine needs to make more power, so it doesn't matter what it is. How are the Liberty Performance small block Chevy heads? And by the way, I missed my wife was on here last night. She was asking questions, and I didn't even call on her, and she had her hand raised and everything. So that was my fault. I don't know about the Liberty Performance small block Chevy heads, Concho Pete. I don't think I've ever tried them. $7.99 on a 6-liter for boost, or run 317 for more boost. Is the difference noticeable? You're going to make less power with the 317 than you will with the 799 because it has lower compression. So at any given boost level, you'll still make less power. But if you have a 1,000 horsepower turbo, either one of those heads will still make 1,000 horsepower. It's just going to take more boost with the 317 heads to make that same amount of power with a 799 head, if that makes any sense. SG, I make 730 horsepower with a 2.3 E85, while a 265 give me 900. Are you talking about, is that the supercharger size? If it is, then yes, it will. Have you ever tested GM hot LS cam with a turbo? I would need to look at what camshaft was in the, I ran a motor for Finnegan recently that might have had that cam in it. I don't know if it was the hot cam or the ASA cam. It was one of those. Can you explain why bigger cams don't work as well in smaller displacement engines? For example, big LS1 cam on a 4.8, it's just less displacement, can't torque through the lower RPM as well. I don't know what you mean by can't torque through. The cam, the way for you to understand it is that the camshaft specs are wilder on a smaller motor than they are on a bigger motor. The displacement tames the cam down. So if you like, that's why I always suggest a smaller camshaft on the 4.8, because and also those specs on a smaller motor will want to make power at a higher engine speed on the smaller motor than it will on a bigger motor. That's what I'm talking about. The bigger motor tames the camshaft down. So because that camshaft wants to make power at a higher engine speed on the smaller motor, what did we say earlier about it taking power away from the bottom? And that's the problem with it. It loses, you trade, when you shift the power curve higher in the RPM range, you get rid of a bunch of torque in the lower part of the RPM range. And that's what happens with cams. Gregory Glover, is it worth porting and adding big 208 valves on TFS 195 on my 383 going to twin S366s? No, you don't. That's the great thing. You don't have to worry about heads and camshafts and all that. So especially if you already have trick flow heads on that thing, you don't have to worry about any of that. The turbos will take care of all that. All you have to do is, hey, look, I want to put 208 valves and port my heads. Boom, there's another pound of boost. I just did that, and it didn't cost me anything. That's the great thing about having turbos. JB, thank you. You think that they have those lights at Lowe's? Cool. And I know that it would be a lot of wiring. At the very least, make it so that just one strand or half of my icicle section goes out. That would be enough. Then I could just do one of them. A 2.3 liter TVS is like 1,000 horsepower blower. Man. Cameron, we run the same air fuel ratio on the gas scale on E85 as we do on gas. But it takes a lot more fuel to equal that because of the different stoic values. So you have to run a lot more fuel to get that equal air fuel on the gas scale. Jonathan, my turbo's rated for 1,300 horsepower through precision. It made 1,024 on 26 pounds. How close could I get to that 1,300 if everything was right? You could tell me what turbo that is, and I probably have a pretty good feel for that. But the rating that they're giving you is for the compressor side of that turbo. So you need to look and see, are you at 1,024 at the wheels? And where are you at back pressure? And what is your drivetrain? Like, how close are you to that 1,300 number already with that wheel rating? How big are the tires? What transmission is it? The drive shaft, all of that stuff. You might be close already, but the other thing you might be close to is you might be close to the flow rate of the hot side, which is not allowing you to get everything that you could out of the cold side. Casey, could you build a CV drive for a supercharger so the blower is always in a sweet spot? Yeah, ProCharger already does that. They have it on one of their blowers, but it would be very expensive and unnecessary since you just would put a turbo on there. Van, so it's very easy to make 550 rear wheel horsepower and the same amount of torque with a 6-liter. How do you make the trans hold up? Yeah, that's another channel. that's not this channel. Richard, boost a CVT. The transmission, is that what you're talking about? The engine, a boosted engine will run with a CVT trans, if that's what your question is. Yeah, Admiral, it sounds like you're wanting to do a lot of stuff with the injection. Jonathan, again, I can't answer your question because I don't have all the variables. I don't know what your back pressure is. I don't know any of that stuff. And the 1300 number that they're giving you is 1300 flywheel horsepower. It's not 1300 wheel horsepower. Kurt, do you think one GT45 would have too much back pressure on a mild Cadillac 500? Yes, it will. Take a look at the video they have up where we ran it on a 454, and the back pressure is very high. 2 GT45s would be too much. Well, it depends on how much power you want to make. They'll support 14 or 1500 horsepower. So I don't think you want that much. I wouldn't suggest 2 of those. You could put 2 smaller ones on there and make the kind of power that you want. Or one, if you have room to put 1 turbo on there, then put 1 S475 or 7875 or something like that on there. Double R, I've got to get going, so yours will be the last question. What is the difference between rear-mounted turbo and manifold-mounted turbos? The thing that you're going to see most is just a change in response rate, and I have a remote turbo video up, so you can see what the change in response rate is, and it will change it. Although I made like 14 feet of change in my remote setup, and none of them are ever like that. Usually it's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet or something. It's not usually very much. So you won't see a lot there. And then it's usually only the first time that you're on the throttle that becomes a problem. Like if you're out road racing and you have plenty of heat in it, you're going on and off, it's going to be fairly responsive. And if you're drag racing, you're going to be able to get the heat into it with power braking it or 2-stepping it or doing all of the things that drag race guys can do. Ideally, the turbos will be closer, but lots of guys out there are running remotes and they work. Okay, guys, got to get going. Thank you all for showing up. That was a great session. I will see you guys all tomorrow, and I'm working on another modular one and another LS one. So I'll keep going, hopefully to get a trip down to West Tech here, hopefully before Christmas, so I can run some more 3800 and possibly some Dodge stuff. And I think maybe the 4200 might be put back together. So what I'm thinking about doing is maybe bringing 1 or 2 of the motors back with me. And I can do some assembly stuff in my garage here and get them done and ready so that when I go down there, I don't have to go down there and then put them together and then spend time where I could possibly be on the dyno. So all that will be good stuff. Thank you guys for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.